electric railway industry began in Berlin, Germany in the 1879 Industrial Exhibition. By 1882, they also developed in Berlin the first streetcar line from this first locomotive. As time went on, the electric railway spread as a replacement for the horse car. The horse car was very expensive, very slow, very time-consuming. The electric railway version of this same public transportation doubled the speed, doubled the range, and created a firestorm of development across the entire civilized world. This translated in the United States to a major change in public transportation, and that involved many miles of cars, many miles of lines. By 1891, they had 3,000 miles of city streetcars on the track and a total of 5,000 cars. 500,000 passengers were carried, and as it says in the picture, this is more than all the steam railroads put together. In the late 1880s, electric streetcar systems were being extended from towns out into the countryside. The cities were growing, and the developers were taking advantage of this new system to extend it and keep extending it for all the market would bear. The two pictures here, the first is the line between Newark and Granville, and the second is the line built by Tom Johnson in 1889 between Dover and New Philadelphia. These were basically streetcars, city streetcars that had been run over the line, and it very quickly became apparent that this was not a good deal. They were too slow to make any kind of speed, too slow to make any kind of schedule, and it led to the development of the bigger, faster interurban car. It was amazing that 6 miles an hour on a horse was considered good to the countryside and the dirt roads. 25 miles an hour for the first cars was considered excellent. We got to go faster. We got to haul more people. So by 1895 to 1897, bigger, faster cars were now up to 50 miles an hour on the new-fangled interurban cars. The only thing missing in transportation in the United States was an all-weather highway. Until World War I, we made do with dirt roads in between the cities, and you could not travel by automobile or truck or wagon or horse if it rained. Highways were commercially usable only 5 months of the year. By 1894, the state had gone over their road program. There was no mechanism to pave roads. So how can we best use the roads? As it says in the article, $1.25 would haul a ton 5 miles by horsepower on a wagon road, 25 miles on an electric railway, and 250 miles on a steam railroad. The only trouble is steam railroads were too expensive to build, and the newfangled electric lines could be built just about any place. So the state undertook to let the companies use the road right away where it was feasible, didn't cost them anything, and it contributed to the economic development by developing all-weather, all-year-round local transportation. It no longer mattered if it rained or snowed. The interurbans would run, and they provided service to the local communities. The dirt roads were extensive all over the place. Here's a picture of Huron downtown with a dirt road on Main Street. That wasn't paved for many years. Castalia in the upper picture is the same way. Those streets, that's Depot and Washington Street, absolutely dirt, all nicely graded for pleasant summer weather. Well, the interurbans grew, and they kept growing. By 1912, the railroads had expanded to a total tax valuation of $132 million. This is up from nothing a few years before to $132 million, $3 billion in today's $3 million in tax money in today's dollars. This industry was so large, in this state alone, they supported 5 builders of electric railway cars. Scattered across the state, they provided electric railway cars for the approximately 100 to 120 interurban lines that were built, running, or being proposed. Another major industry was to provide the electrical system that operated the cars. The interurban cars ran on electricity that they generated themselves because there were no power companies in those days. Most lines used the overhead system that provided 600 volts DC to operate the motors driving each axle. Ohio Brass in Mansfield was one of the industry's largest supplier of overhead parts in the world. The interurban cars required very heavy-duty trucks, motors, and controls. The high speeds, high horsepower necessary quickly separated them from the city streetcars, which were still poking along at 16 miles an hour. Here's a picture of what one of the power trucks looks like out from under the car in the shop. The motors are geared to the axle by the bull gear that's hidden in the gear case right next to the wheel, and each axle is driven. Now these motors are about 125 horsepower each, running on 600 volts DC. The power was got to the cars from an overhead wire, under which ran the trolley wheel, supported against the wire by a trolley pole. Over on the lower left, the trolley retriever kept the rope tight on the trolley pole, and if the trolley came off the wire, it would quickly snap shut, pull the pole down so that it didn't damage the overhead or the car. This was just part of a very complicated, very interesting industry to support the electric railways. The cars themselves came in a variety of sizes and shapes, all tailored for the railroad. Going down in the left column, you'll see streetcars to operate in the city, freight cars to haul the new business that they were taking away from the railroads, the local freight, work cars to keep the lines running, and a whole different number of electric passenger cars built for many different types of service, for many different types of lines. As we are centered in Huron, we will take a look around now to see what was happening outside of Huron for the local electric railways. 1893, Sandusky, Milan, and Norwalk, the very first one, the longest one in Ohio at the time. 1894, Tom Johnson's Lorain Street Railway. 1897, between Lorain and Cleveland. 1899, Toledo, Fremont, and Norwalk Electric Railway. And finally, our most important one, because it hit Huron directly, 1900, the Sandusky and Interurban, which was built with a problem at the bridge in Huron. The Sandusky and Interurban, incorporated in 1899, built a completely self-contained interurban system with the powerhouse that provided the electricity, the car barn that stored the cars, and the workshop that maintained them over on Columbus Avenue in Sandusky. For those of you that are familiar, that became the Giant Tiger store before it burned. But it was interesting to note, these people came to Sandusky, the same people that built the Lorain-Cleveland line came to Sandusky, coordinated the city streetcar lines, the other interurbans in the area, incorporated them into the Sandusky interurban, and proceeded to connect it to their own railroad, the Lorain and Cleveland. Here's a picture out at the Soldiers' Home. This is DeWitt Avenue, and in the background would be Route 250 off in the background. On the left was the Sandusky, Norwalk, and Mansfield station. On the right, the Soldiers' Home streetcar station. And we see a S&I interurban ready to leave on another travel on down over the former SMNN line to Norwalk. In January 1st, 1903, now the you will notice the S&I was incorporated 1899, January 3rd. We're finally working on the bridge over the river in Huron. The Lakeshore Electric went to work on it on the 1st. By January 20th, the commissioners agreed that if they fixed the bridge, they could use it. By the 22nd, they finally completed it, strengthening the bridge, but had not laid the track. By January 29th, they got the track in and put a schedule on between Sandusky and Ceylon Junction for the new bridge and the new cars. They also tested the bridge by opening it and closing it because that was required by government regulations because of dredging work on the river. And the other kicker, on October 5th, they got a notification from the government that they were going to have to open the bridge for dredging, and Huron ushered in a whole new wave of harbor development. December 15th, up there, 1903, they give the schedule for the interurban cars that left every hour. Now, it's interesting, at this time, Sandusky was not connected to the normal interurban line going to the west. There was connections over the old Sandusky, Milan, and Huron, but it was all by itself on the Lakeshore Electric. So the only way it connected to the new interurban line was two dedicated cars that they brought in from Lorraine to run the Huron shuttle. One car would leave Huron, one car would leave Ceylon Junction. They would meet, if the bridge was working, they would meet on the siding at Slate Cut and pass one another and continue on their way. If the bridge wasn't working, they would stop on each side of the bridge, the passengers would walk across and they would proceed on their way. Here's a view of the bridge looking into Huron from Berlin Road, and you can see it's quite a flimsy bridge built for light wagons. The tracks are over to the left-hand side, so when this picture was taken, the tracks were in and the bridge might have been functional. This is the track layout in Huron in 1904. If we start from right to left, you can see LS Electric, that's the Lakeshore Electric, coming in, crossing Berlin Road and going to River Road. Now at this time, Old Lake Road is right up there along the shore, and later, not too long after that, it was relocated because of washouts. Just by the E under Electric, you can see that inlet there. That was Sages Grove, Sages Farm, Sages Grove. Lakeshore Electric traded the highway property for the lakefront property, and the new highway relocated right along the Lakeshore Electric track to the south. Well, the track came into River Road, turned north, turned left on Berlin Road, crossed the river, turned right on Main, and got to the station, 203 Main Street, went north a little bit, out on South Street to cross the first inlet with a stop at Camp Street. And I don't know why they didn't go out Cleveland Road, but they went through the woods out to Cleveland Avenue at the second inlet there you can see. Then they followed the road to stop 13 at Rye Beach Road. This picture shows the second interurban station in Sandusky. On a busy day, we see Lakeshore Electric car number 151 on the right, headed for Cleveland. On the left, we see car number 54 on Market Street. This car is heading for Huron on the Huron shuttle service. They would go out to Milan Road, turn down the right-of-way, and head over the line to Huron, where they met the other car of this same type that was coming from Ceylon, repeated back and forth to the station every hour on the hour. Slide number 21 is a picture of the bridge in Huron going over the river and coming into town. This bridge continued in use until it was replaced by the Huron Cutoff, and all interurban cars, until that replacement, had to come up through Berlin Road, over this old rickety bridge, and up into town to the station on Main Street. While they were going through all the maneuvers on the bridge in Huron, the Sandusky and Interurban kept building. From Salon Junction, they went to Lorain to connect to the Lorain and Cleveland. They also went south to Norwalk through Berlin Heights to connect to the Toledo, Fremont, and Norwalk Railway, which they were in the midst of purchasing. This aerial shot of Huron is very interesting because it shows the route that the interurban took to the first station. You can see the station over there right in front of the church on Main Street. The track curved as it came up Berlin Road, and the location of the swing bridge is shown by the orange square. The station itself was in the left corner of the hotel. In this picture, you see a Lakeshore Electric car headed north on Main Street, headed west over the line to Toledo. Interesting here, we see barrels on the freight wagon being ready for the next freight shipment. Salesman over there walking with his sample bags, visiting the town for the day. He'll visit for the day and move on to the next one, taking the interurban line to provide transportation. It's official. The Lakeshore Electric Railway has been incorporated to construct and operate an electric railway from Cleveland to Toledo. All the people we saw in the Sandusky Interurban and the Toledo, Fremont, Norwalk, and the Lorain and Cleveland all got together. They got their act together and incorporated all these different lines into one railroad. This is a picture taken to correspond to a January 4th, 1902 announcement that the first car was run from Cleveland to Detroit over the Everett-Moore system on Monday. The special car Alpha left Cleveland at 9:30, having on board our famous incorporators, Mr. Moore, Mr. Mahler, and other officials of the road. The picture is of the car Beta, which was a sister to the car Alpha that they took on this trip. This was an original S&I interurban car, and it happened to be one of the fastest at the time. The swing bridge in Huron, when it was operating, was quite a sight to see. This is a picture of one of the original TF&N cars coming across the bridge at a walking pace because it was, again, a very slow, tedious journey, and they had to be very careful not to collapse the bridge. Progress was being made on the new railroad. In this shot, we show that Huron now has the green light, and we see if we travel along the northern part of the red line, we see the brand new Lakeshore Electric main line, because finally Sandusky is connected by the Sandusky, Fremont, and Southern, proceeding from Sandusky to Fremont. What this did was put Huron on the main line of the Lakeshore Electric for the first time since its opening. Norwalk sort of faded in the background and took a secondary place in the Lakeshore Electric operations. A further step in 1911 was the completion of the Fostorian-Fremont Electric Railway. This opened up the Lima route, as it was known, in Ohio, and now you were connected from Cleveland through Sandusky, Fremont, Fostoria, Findlay, on down to Wapakoneta, Lima, and Dayton. This didn't last too long because it was in direct competition with too many railroad lines, but for a while it was a high point of the system, and it caused more traffic to come through the community of Huron. All around the little bridge and the corkscrew system. In 1912, the Wheeling and Lake Erie announced plans to expand the Huron docks and make it impossible to continue with the Berlin Road Bridge. That all had to be taken out and removed, a new harbor put in, turning basin, slips, and widening and deepening of the river and harbor for the new boats that were being built to build up, the new boats that were being built to handle the increasing coal and iron ore. But before that happened, before the bridges were moved, the Lakeshore Electric just kept relocating their tracks around the South Slip and continued to use the old bridge as long as they could. What this involved, you can see in the picture, the green line showing the original track as it came into Huron over the bridge, when there was only a north slip. The building of the south slip caused the track to be moved over, and the building of the turning basin, and that caused yet another move of the track, but they still continued across the old Berlin Road Bridge and out through the old Sandusky and Interurban until 1918. 1911, the state started on the new highway bridge, but it wasn't until 1918 that the Lakeshore put together the property and built the line, the new station, and got the cutoff into operation. The new Huron cutoff opened November 5th, 1918, and included a new interurban station, freight house, and passing siding at 505 Main Street. They cleaned up their act and got the tracks out of the road, all the way out of town, and over to Rye Beach. From this point on, Huron was connected to all the Lakeshore Electric traffic that it could handle. Hourly passenger service connected Toledo, Detroit, Cleveland, Fort Wayne, Lima, Cincinnati. Any place you wanted to go, you are now connected in Huron. 1917, the Lakeshore Electric went into a full fleet of steel interurban cars built in Ohio. This was to accommodate passenger loads of 5 to 6 million passengers a year. To handle this traffic, it took 3 cars, and this was hourly service, 3 cars, a total of 180 feet of interurban, traveling down the track at 65 miles an hour. These cars would split at Salon. The first 2 would go through Huron to Sandusky. The third would go on to Fremont via Norwalk and join the other 2 to finish the trip to Toledo or Detroit. This is a picture of the Schertzer rolling lift bridge that was installed at the river in Huron, and we see a Lakeshore Electric car headed across it. This type of lift bridge was fairly unique. They had one at Toledo, which still is in business today. Finally, a couple years ago, they had to replace parts of the deck, but the same bridge carried us over Cherry Street in Toledo, and this is the bridge in Huron. Over on the right-hand side, you can see the left span of the bridge that actually lifts. It rolls backwards, comes up in the air for the boats to go across and up the river. This is a photograph of the new station, the freight house, and the passing siding that was built at 505 Main Street in Huron. The substation was put in later, and behind that you can see the electrical substation work necessary for the transformers and the lightning arresters. But this took the 19,000 AC volts that were on the power transmission line, and inside the substation was equipment to convert it to 600 volts DC for the trolley wire. This is a overlay of the original Sanborn insurance map and a modern Google overlay, because people have asked where the devil that station was. Well, here it turns out, it's just about in the parking lot of the donut shop over on Cleveland Road on the eastbound, because it says there, Cleveland Road East, right on Main Street. This is where the station and freight house were located, and it has since been paved over. Or continuing east, we will come to Sages Grove, which was stop 22B, which we mentioned. The Lakeshore Electric, once the highway was moved, got this property, kept this property right up to the end of its existence, planning to put a park in. In their 1908 timetable, they noted it was a large grove owned by this company, and it was an elegant place for campers having their own tents and camp equipment. First, the company built a concrete cottage, and it was a favorite place for the executives to stay for fishing and the beautiful beach. In addition to the beach, they had a siding laid down temporarily, and they would load sand for the railway. The railway needed a large supply of clean, dry sand to run their sanders, which were used in the car to assist in stopping. They would feed sand to the wheels to keep them from slipping. And other parts of the system, like sandblasting and ballast, filling in and stuff like that, could easily be picked up at their own source right on the property. A few years later, a permanent siding was built, and 2 cars were brought in from the Toledo Railway. On the right-hand side, the private car Toledo, on the left-hand side, a Toledo streetcar, and in the middle is the boss's Packard. Mr. Forsgaard was the president of the company. While the Lakeshore was operating, these 2 cars were taken in at the end of the summer season, right down the track. They were fully operational and stored in the Sandusky shops. They were brought out again in the summer for the summer season. When the Lakeshore Electric quit, the cars were parked here as permanent cottages. And the Second World War, they took the power equipment out, but the cars were relatively intact right up into the 60s. The station master in Huron was a gentleman named George Window. He held his job from day one, beginning of the line, to the end of the line in Huron. You see an inset there, one of the tickets. This ticket was good from Berlin Heights to Salon to Huron, and it was stamped by George himself, July 29th, 1937. One of our local notables, a gentleman named Ernst Niebergall, was a local photographer, sort of our Norman Rockwell of the area. He took pictures all over and salvaged and saved a bunch of pictures showing George and the typical passengers ready to have some fun and go on a trip on the Lakeshore Electric Railway in Huron. After the Lakeshore Electric went out of business, they had a large number of cars to scrap, to get rid of, to sell as sheds, cottages, all along the system. The Toledo Edison took over the property of the Lakeshore Electric at Sages Grove. They took over the power line easement, the power substations and stuff like that. They decided to take a group of the cars out to Sages for summer cottages for their employees. And this is what they did. And if you worked for Toledo Edison, you reserved your place and had a wonderful beach, a wonderful place to spend your summer vacation. The local kids I talked to that spent a lot of good summers here told me that they called this place Tunerville, named after the good old Tunerville trolley. Well, the Lakeshore Electric went out of business, went out of the electric railway business May 15th, 1938. They went into the bus business. The passengers had dropped to where it was no longer economical to run the big, fast electric cars. The highways were now paved, bus licenses were very expensive, and the road taxes were next to nothing compared to running a railroad. So here we see the Lakeshore coach schedule for 1946, which was the last year the coaches operated before they sold the system. And as you can see, it follows exactly the route of the Lakeshore Electric, right down to the time schedules and the stop numbers. That completes our story.